Mercedes' turnaround this season has been pretty incredible. Lewis Hamilton spent the first 7 races yo-yoing up and down the order across the finish line, while George Russell achieved heroics by making the most of Ferrari and Red Bull's early problems to never finish outside the top 5. Since Baku though, in race week 8, neither have finished outside the top 5, and the upcoming Singapore Grand Prix could be the point where they finally manage the last little push to secure a race win. How will they manage it? Well, stick around to find out. Despite Mercedes' recent turn in form, you can't deny that the team has fallen a long way in the space of a year. They dominated the sport in 2020 and the 6th season before that, but in 2021, Max Verstappen and Red Bull ruined their chances of winning every single honour available in the turbo hybrid era. Though 2021 was a closely fought drivers' championship battle that Lewis Hamilton narrowly lost, this season they aren't even in the battle. Christian Horner has expressed surprise that Mercedes have provided so little threat to Red Bull's chances of a title double this season. Having seen off the challenge of a malfunctioning Ferrari team, Red Bull are out clear in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships, and on course to capture both with races to spare. Mercedes could yet pit Ferrari to second place in the team standings, but are yet to win a Grand Prix this year, having been off the pace ever since testing, when they unveiled a W13 with no side pods. Given how closely matched the two constructors were last term, when Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton entered the Abu Dhabi final level on points, Horner is taken aback by how Mercedes got their interpretation of the new regulations for 2022 so wrong. Asked if he'd been surprised by Mercedes' relative lack of pace, Horner replied, "Yes, because they transitioned early. They made quite a noise about compromising last year's championship because of moving over very early to their 2022 car. We felt they would come back with a renewed vengeance for this year. So quite remarkable that after the domination they've had for the last 8 years, that they've yet to win a Grand Prix in 2022. They may not have won one yet, but the Singapore Grand Prix is definitely going to be the best chance the team have had so far. But how? After such a disappointing year for the Silver Arrows, are they going to turn it around in Singapore of all places? After all, it is a street circuit with a terrible track surface that should, in theory, be really bad for the W13 and its tendency to bounce whenever possible. Well, they have been slowly able to adapt to the bouncing. The W13 runs very close to the ground due to its high aero sensitivity, forcing it to have an adapted floor with wider ducts which, when the bouncing starts, take more air out, instantly reducing the pressure under the floor. At the same time, they create more powerful vortices on the edge of the car, helping protect the underfloor airflow. A longitudinal metallic bar and the new position of the tie rod make the floor stiffer, reducing the sensitivity to bouncing triggered by Singapore's street circuit tarmac. Earlier on in the season, especially at Baku, the Mercedes floor edges were suffering from their exposure to airflow on top of the car. This is a trait of their zero-pod design. A car with more standard side pods, like the RB18 or F175, protects the edge of the floor from airflow above, reducing the forces at play on the floor and reducing flexing. You might remember in Canada, when everyone was in uproar about Mercedes knowing about a technical directive that the FIA attempted to implement illegally before anyone else. They tried to fit a second stay to help stiffen the floor edge at the time, but since the other teams pointed out that what the FIA had done was illegal, they didn't. Well, since then, Mercedes have been hard at work trying to stiffen their floor edges, and they seem to finally have managed it. Now the undercar can work in more stable flow conditions, with the Venturis less disrupted by external air interferences, such as the floor edge flexing or air seeping in or out of the underfloor. The reduction in the amount of air under the floor, helped by the new wider ducts, also means there is less load on the rear of the car, which again helps to reduce the bouncing. With the causes of porpoising addressed, Mercedes do need to worry about one other side effect of their zero-pod design, and that is cooling. Despite Singapore being a night race, temperatures are expected to be around 30 degrees centigrade and incredibly humid. Formula 1 cars are designed in such a way that to run at an optimal temperature, meaning not so hot they set on fire, they have to be moving quickly. Something that's surprisingly challenging, as Chief Technical Officer for Mercedes James Allison said. Singapore is a circuit on which you deal with reliability. The temperatures are high, the straights long, and to have a good cooling is a priority. A standard Formula 1 car cools itself by bringing air in through the side pods, over the radiators where the heat transfers onto the air, and then out of the back of the car. But the W13 has no side pods, so how does that work? Well, it does have side pods really, just not as we know them. The W13 represents an extreme project with two complicated aero shapes. The work to obtain linear and clean sides gives them the advantage of their downwash having a bigger outwards thrust of the air than other cards on the grid. This protects the edge of the floor in the same way that the vortices do, stopping unwanted air getting under the floor. This was a revolutionary philosophy, but did make some major mechanical changes necessary to fit the car inside of its casing. A lack of space from heat exchangers and compact exhausts make cooling more difficult, something that is absolutely critical in Singapore. The Mercedes side pods are actually two tight air intakes that sit low on the car and get air funneled into them by the upper outline, as well as the fins which direct the flow downwards and cool the entire heating surface. The intercoolers inside the body are designed and shaped to reduce the volumes of the sides, allowing a cleaner line for the air to flow over the body. Higher up the car sit exhaust and turbine, which are subjected to 900-degree thermal stress, hence why the W13 has the extra vents at the top of the car as well. The extreme conditions of Singapore means that Mercedes will have to find a balance in their car setup that ensures enough air makes it into their side pods to keep the car cool. The W13 has been the most reliable car on the grid this season, and at a track where Mercedes might be able to finally secure a race win, they don't want a retirement due to overheating. With Mercedes having a much strengthened floor edge and a reduced rear aero load with their current spec W13, the team are in with a real shot of keeping their porpoising under control enough to make use of the performance they have. At the Hungaroring, a track very similar to the Marina Bay circuit, George Russell secured Mercedes' only pole position of the year, and the team finished with both drivers on the podium, a strong indicator that on a high downforce track, the W13 can be a serious contender. Despite all of this, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff is trying to avoid making predictions for the upcoming Singapore Grand Prix, after the Italian Grand Prix did not meet the expectation he had from the team's pre-race simulations. His drivers were 5th and 6th fastest in qualifying, and penalties meant George Russell moved up 4 places to start on the front row. However, he lacked the pace to fight for victory and finished 3rd, while Lewis Hamilton recovered from a penalised 19th on the grid to take 5th place. The next race in Singapore will see teams switch from minimum to maximum downforce levels. Wolff said, "The track layout should suit our car, the bumps not. On the simulations, again it says it should be one of our better tracks, but I'm trying to stay on the careful side with any predictions for Singapore. We think, with the changes Mercedes have been making, that the bumps may not prove as much of a problem as they have in the past for the Silver Arrows, leaving them with their best opportunity so far to snatch a race win. It won't be Mercedes that the F1 world is concentrating on in Singapore though. Verstappen will garner much of the attention, with a scintillating run of form having given the Red Bull driver the opportunity to seal his 2nd title in as many years, and the earliest coronation in 2 decades. To do so, Verstappen must outscore Ferrari's Charles Leclerc by 22 points, teammate Sergio Perez by 9, and Mercedes' George Russell by 6. That means the Dutchman needs to win his 6th race in a row, and then rely on misfortune for others to wrap up the defense of the championship. From what we've seen this season, he will definitely be able to rely on Charles Leclerc finding some misfortune this weekend. Want to know more about what's happening in F1? Then click the video on your screen and I'll see you there.